Okay, thank you, everybody. If I can get you to take your seats and give attention to our next panel. Thank you so much. And I just, somebody just designated me as a cat herder out there. And if you want to see something really, really funny, Google up a video of the new generation of cat herders, and it's done in Montana, and it's like rawhide, and it's all these cats running through the tumbleweeds. It's absolutely hilarious. So once again, I'm going to now introduce Dennis Damon, who I've introduced before, a privacy expert, a senior advisor to the Secretary of Homeland Security, and he represents our nation well around the world in discussions around data privacy. So, Dennis, it's your baby spanking.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it very much. Well, that's got a weird echo there. That is really weird. Well, welcome, guys. So we're running a little bit late here, so we're really going to sort of jump into this. And the hope here is I've had some wonderful conversations with some of you folks in the room who have been really interested in what's been happening on the privacy landscape, and more specifically on the state side. So my hope is that from an interactive standpoint, you guys will have some questions for us, and we can, hopefully answer them. But for me personally, Harold and I and Val, this past week actually had a wonderful opportunity to go to the World Affairs Council in the U.S. State Department to present the topic of privacy to a bunch of visiting folks from the European Union. And some of the points that I made to them was around sort of the idea that we're living today in this what we call data-driven economy. Everything that we do today leaves a trail of data that somebody is going to use for whatever purposes that it needs to be used for, whether that's advertising, whether that's for medical stuff, and the list just goes on and on and on. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of end in sight to where the data is going, because, well, the data storage has become very cheap. And so everyone likes to save everything. In fact, I show a picture of my wife's desktop with about 1 million documents on it because she won't delete anything anymore. And so that leaves us with some problems. That leaves us either with hackers getting access to the data, or that leaves us with companies that are misusing the data. When they told us one thing, they went and did something else. Cambridge Analytica is an example of that. And so again, it's sort of now put the issue of privacy now at the forefront of, well, what do we do with this, right? Do we go and swing that pendulum all the way to the left and protect everybody, but yet we kill the data-driven economy, we kill innovation, or we swing it to the other side where we just kind of have a wild west with data and live it out. And so what I like to say is that privacy is the currency that we pay to play in the ecosystems. I'm watching people with the camera phones and the laptops and the watches. We are willing to give up something for subsidized content, free content, being able to use YouTube, for free and whatnot. And so that's how we sort of, play. So, when you look at the framers of the Constitution, and I'm going to focus first on the U.S., but we look at the framers of the Constitution, it was sort of put in the Fourth Amendment that there was an idea of privacy, but they really never spelled it out as a basic fundamental human right like they have in the European Union. And really, I don't think any of the founding fathers ever envisioned us to be where we are today with technology. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, but as we do, I want to just take a quick moment and let our panelists just quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll throw some questions in there and see where we can go. So we'll start over here.
Can you hear me okay? Hi, I'm Chris Toth. I am the Executive Director of the National Association of Attorneys General.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Cheney. There's a lot of things I do, but my main job, I'm the owner of the Cybersecurity law firm of Texas.
My name is Perry Aftab. I'm an internet privacy and security lawyer, and I started in digital privacy work in 1994.
Hi, my name is Ane Chowdhury. I'm a serial entrepreneur. My current company focuses on safe internal usage of sensitive data, which is when analysts, engineers, data scientists access your data, how do we actually make sure that it is safely done?
Great, thank you very much. All right, so like I said, so far looking at this, right, our founding fathers really never understood that that we would be where we are today within our modern digital world. So the question that I have, and this is for almost anybody, we can kind of go around however we want, but have we really, have we compromised our privacy to have the world at our fingertips right now, to have the ability to have DoorDash, bring us a meal, or to have a car pick me up later on after dinner and take me home, right? Can privacy really survive the digital age, in your opinion?
Okay, so I look at this from a different perspective because I grew up in this space as an engineer. I actually, information systems undergrad, then I went to law school, then I went to the FBI where I investigated cybercrime. And then I ran security operations centers in corporate. So the way I grew up in this space is from breaches, right? And so understandably, I think there is a certain aspect of information that we as individuals allow that we give DoorDash, for instance. But I think that there's a different value for different types of data. Like, I did actually write a blog about DoorDash, and my home address means different than my email address. It just feels different from a privacy perspective. And as I've grown up in this space in working with the FBI and understanding the interplay between information security, which is what it is, and privacy, to understand the distinction between if we don't have good information security controls, we could never really have privacy, and they're married together. And so I think the average consumer gives certain things away, but they give it away with the expectation or a trust factor that you will protect it like you say you're going to do in your privacy policy.
I always say it's kids, cash, and kidneys. I could never come up with the same letter on all of them, so I use the same sound. So children's privacy, financial privacy, and health privacy. And those are the most sensitive issues in the United States that we look at. And in Europe, they include among sensitive issues that they want more privacy protection, union membership, and a lot of other things that in the United States we don't consider sensitive. So when we talk about privacy, we need to figure out what we're talking about. Everything, the way you looked when you came home today, or what time you came home, or the more important issues, your financial situation, your bank accounts, your health risks when you're looking at these DNA tests that all of us are taking, and our children and what it means to be a child.
The short answer to your specific question is yes. I think privacy will survive the gig economy. If you parse the problem we are facing, it's this, that companies are collecting more data, and then they're giving access to more people inside the company to that data so that we can be more optimized. Now, if you reframe this challenge as a mathematical challenge, what it means is that can I increase the amount of data I use without increasing the corresponding risk, right? And once you start parsing it and saying, can we contextualize how data is used in the decisions we are making, it will survive. That's part of what we are doing, and we can get into more details.
Okay, so did you want to?
Sure. You'd asked a question about whether privacy will survive, and really is the job of my members, who are the 56 state and territorial AGs, to make sure it survives. Without talking about ongoing litigation, it is public that the AGs are investigating Facebook, Google. There's been a lawsuit filed against Cambridge Analytica by a number of our members. So this is a very, very serious issue for AGs. And then along with the Federal Trade Commission and Department of Justice, the AGs are on the vanguard of enforcing the idea that Americans are entitled to their privacy. So there will be a lot going on in the next few years, and I think we'll have a better idea 1, 2, 3 years from now where we are with enforcing those privacy rights.
Well, that's actually sort of a good segue. I'm going to jump a couple of questions over here, but as we are taking a look at the landscape, and we know again that attorney generals are using this either for their next election or for the purpose of helping make our community safer. We have tried here in the U.S. for a number of years to adopt federal law. And, every single year there's probably, 5 or 6 bills that are pushed and then they die within the House and nothing ever happens. And then we have other countries like the EU that has successfully pushed out GDPR. It's been in enforcement since May of this year. And now we're seeing countries like Brazil that will have a new law coming into play as well in January. But now we've got CCPA now. right? And then New Mexico and New Jersey have passed similar bills and whatnot. So to kind of start with you, do you think that we will ever have an overarching federal privacy bill here in the US? Or will we continue to have 50 different sectorialized laws like we have with COPPA and HIPAA and everything else, making it more difficult?
That's a really hard question to answer because I just don't have a crystal ball to see if the feds can unite around that. There's a lot of diverging interests on the federal level and a lot of different interests that are going to be lobbying congressmen one way or the other. I can tell you that with the state AGs, it's very much a bipartisan issue. As you mentioned, there's a number of states that are looking into or are on the verge of passing or have passed privacy laws. I do think I can safely say that you will see more of those passed around the country. How many states? That's tough to say. But both parties unite around this idea of privacy, which is why you're seeing the actions that the state AGs are taking in a very bipartisan fashion right now.
Yeah, I think that the secret's going to be NAG and the attorneys general. I don't have a great deal of faith in what's going to happen out of Congress for the next year at least. But I think the secret, although I hate having 50 different laws plus, and many conflict and many different values and trying to figure out what that means in compliance, maybe if the feds don't come in with something that's preemptive, maybe we come up with a uniform commercial code equivalent for privacy. We did it on sales. It was very important. Maybe we can do it on privacy, but you're going to have California be willing to step back a little bit. But I think that my faith is with the states right now.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, the issue is a fundamental difference between the EU and the United States, right? The privacy laws were enacted in the EU based on the Holocaust, really, and the information that was collected back then. And what Hitler did is, go down the rolls and then start gathering up people. So we don't have that history in the United States, which is why we have our secretarial laws that we do have. CCPA is such a big deal is because it's a comprehensive privacy legislation. That means it applies to everyone, not just banking, healthcare, and children's privacy. So that's why the big dust bowl in regards to that. I mean, Texas has legislation right now that's been sitting, and it probably won't go into effect until 2020. But the states are considering privacy legislation to start to try to harangue all of this idea, because if you're Google doesn't have any regulations on them. They're not in financial, well, to the extent that they're not in financial services or children's privacy and things like that. That's why they can sell your data. That's why Facebook can sell your data, because we don't have an overarching law that says me, Mary Cheney, has something inherent, which is an inherent right to privacy. But because we have a bunch of lawyers, and I am one, that draw these distinctions, we can now sell this data without conscience. Right?
It's interesting for me as an individual, so some of you guys know that my sons recently turned 18, they're off in college, and now they get to make their own decisions, but having a father that is a privacy and security person, I always kind of drilled in their mind, don't just give out your information and all that other good stuff, but now they're off at DBU doing their own thing now. But Perry, as we sort of think about these devices and technologies that are that our kids have right now, because I still believe that one of the fundamental problems we have from a privacy perspective is, well, we've gotten rid of home economics in schools. We don't really teach computers anymore. We don't teach safety in schools. So we now have a new problem on our hands where kids are going off and doing things right now. But in terms of that with children, what are we doing around helping children? And then when things do go wrong, what's available to people right now in terms of that privacy regulations and stuff?
It's interesting. We get a lot more interest in privacy when the kids are 2nd through 4th grade. And because they don't want people to know that they're still picking their nose and wetting the bed. And then we get it again 6th to 8th grade because of cyberbullying. So what information about you could the mean girl or mean boy in class use against you? And then they get nervous about that and changing bodies and the rest. Then as they get closer to applying for colleges, they become more concerned because scholarships, college acceptance, and all the rest. So what we've learned, and it's something that Barbara Lawler taught me years ago, she's one of the top privacy advisors to everybody. Barbara said, you have to make it real. And so if we want anyone to care about privacy, then we have to make it real. And all you need to do is look at the fact that Facebook shares went up after they were fined $5 billion for their privacy practices, that we aren't caring. And I got rid of my Facebook, and then my sister yelled at me because I didn't have all the pictures of my niece's wedding. So, you sit there and you want to get rid of it, and when we look at antitrust, I'm not a big fan of antitrust, but in this case, there isn't an alternative. So all of us are turning LinkedIn into Facebook.
Well, I think that the answer is a private right of action. If because state AGs and all the privacy laws from the states and all the privacy laws on the books don't allow you as an individual citizen to go sue. Litigation will stop some of the shenanigans, because if they say, I have a right to now go sue because you violated my trust and my privacy, then it gets real.
May I ask a question just as a fellow panelist? Have you seen, excuse me, have you seen anybody sue on a terms of service failure to enforce the terms of service? Is that a way around this?
I saw, oh my world, I just blogged about it. Connecticut. In Connecticut, they allowed the state law tort claims of, I think it was malpractice, breach of contract based on the privacy policy, and it was a third one. And I think that the courts themselves are now gonna get involved in this, and they're gonna allow a citizen to now sue individually, depending upon the value of the information, because what it was HIPAA. The organization violated HIPAA, and they said HIPAA created a standard of care that they failed to meet, and they allowed that case to be litigated from a state law perspective.
Love it. Sorry, I
No,
just
that's
needed,
fine.
because I'm not on my feet as a practitioner anymore, so wonderful.
Well, the way I think about it is that there is a bell curve of companies that are working consciously, and there are companies that are kind of not doing the right thing with data. And what is going to happen is over a period of time, as technologies and this awareness evolves, we will see a change. And it is probably not going to be as driven by legislation as we are thinking. It will not probably be driven by lawsuits as we are thinking. I think what's going to happen is that from inside the company, as people get more and more aware of their responsibilities, even how, let's go back 15 years, right? And if you take a company like Google, probably 20 people had access to all the data. 15 years later, 20,000 people have access to all the data. So what that means is that while they were developing technologies which were focused on external breaches, the technologies that focus on internal breaches has been lagging. That awareness is up now. Like from our anecdotal evidence, based on the technology that we have built, I have gone and spoken with about 24 CISOs and CIOs. Every one of them recognizes this as a problem. Every one of them is looking for a tool that can actually solve the problem. So if you can give me a couple of minutes, let me just break down what the problem is. The problem is that whether you talk to an engineer, whether you use a BI tool, or whether you use an app to access data, it uses SQL. SQL or SQL-like query. Now the problem is in access control, you basically are telling somebody that here is the main door and I'll let you in. But what happens when somebody goes in is what SQL is all about. So an engineer has accesses the information that is the privileged information using SQL. Till date, there has not been a technology that can parse SQL and figure out that what is being asked for is safe. If it is safe, it passes through. If it is unsafe, the SQL query is in our company, we actually rewrite the query to make it safe. Like these kind of technologies did not exist 2 years back. One of the deployments that we have done is one of the largest ride-sharing companies, and they had a bunch of public events where they were tracking reporters, and there was another breach where a bunch of people were tracking their exes, where they were going. Then having implemented this, today we process about 50,000 queries a day with 0 breaches in the last several months. So it's also, you have to give time for technology to catch up to solve these problems. Now those tools are there, and I think that we will see companies adapt it much more than legislation can ever get you to.
As much as I love technology, I don't know, because misconfiguration of the S3 bucket is not something that is safe or unsafe. It's lack of talent and skill. And privacy breaches that occur, and there have been plenty this year that have occurred based on a misconfiguration
Absolutely.
issue, more so than a hacker getting in and taking that information. I mean, look at Capital One. It was an exposed cloud
That's right.
bucket, right? So again, I love technology. I grew up on technology. I get paid because of technology. However, I just don't, I think the disconnect between the technologists and the privacy people is the fact that you're missing the human element of this and the people. I mean, you can use behavioral analytics to try from an internal perspective, but behavioral analytics is not going to resolve the fact that you didn't know how to configure an AWS bucket.
True, but here is where the issue is, that neither legislation nor lawsuit can prevent a misconfiguration. You have to lean on technology to figure out a way that misconfigurations don't happen. Think about self-driven cars versus people-driven cars. Today, self-driven cars, well, people may agree or disagree, and it depends on whether you are like here or in California.
Sleeping at the wheel on a Tesla.
Or sleeping at the wheel of a Tesla. So the thing is that technology can actually solve a lot more problems. It is still driven by people. Uh, Misconfigurations happen all the time, but imagine if there was a way to go through every single port to make sure it's not misconfigured. Humans cannot do that. One of the companies we are working with, their group of employees, it's an e-commerce company, group of employees basically downloaded data internally and then sold it in the dark web. So what they have done is previously spent millions of dollars getting auditors in. But again, the scale is 10,000 queries a day for this e-commerce company. Which auditor is going to go through line by line of SQL to figure that out? And SQL is not a single line query, it's nested and complex, and only a machine can take care of that. And we will get to those solutions too.
So you had said something, did you want to, or, okay. I didn't want to talk about SQL, but, I'm not sure if lawyers like to do that. So you had said something interesting earlier about the private right of action sort of scenario, right? We have seen that in other laws. In my case, I've seen that in email regulations, especially like in Canada, where again, but the problem that's existed, I think, for a while, and this kind of might be a question for both of you here, but when you look at private right of action and you look in the privacy arena, I don't think so far to date we've seen any major cases come out where somebody's actually successfully sued and won damages against a company for misuse of data or loss of data, because it's hard to prove the privacy impact to an individual if an email address gets lost and whatnot. And so like last week, for those who follow some of the privacy pieces, there's an association called the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And last week, they were in Las Vegas for their big privacy security risk conference. And the communications commissioner, Tom Wheeler, actually had a keynote. And he had said that it was basically time to move from the concept of regulated consent to regulating conduct of companies. That basically what he's trying to do is to reduce the burden, to take it off the back of us as consumers, and to make privacy a forethought and not an afterthought. So that kind of rolls back into the private right of action aspect of it, but does that solve, like a technology problem, does that solve the issue that would make companies do better, to build better products and services? Does something like that work? I mean, is that even feasible?
I'll answer only because I have to run, so forgive me, I've got to try to get to Washington. But in Europe and other places in the world, including Canada, they give the government authority to decide what can and cannot do with data. They decide and tell the companies what they can do, and parents can't, and we cannot consent to the contrary. In the United States, we're based on a consent method, which is you can let them do things because we allow people to do all kinds of crazy things because it's the United States.
Because we're buy one, get one free nation.
Yes, that's how we're defined. And so as we look at where those values are going to be, that's going to be hard. So if we're talking about conduct of the industry, absolutely. And that's what COPPA's always been about. And I'm testifying or speaking at the COPPA workshop on Monday on this, and is it working? And should we put more onus on this? And can we trust the industry? And I think I think what we're seeing now is the industry may not be as trustworthy as we thought they were. And techlash is hitting a lot, so maybe it's time for that. But I don't want our personal choices to be trumped because the FTC or the FCC or somebody in Congress or someone else has decided that that shouldn't happen. So, and that's the controversy we're always going to have with Europe and why GDPR won't work here. But forgive me, everyone, so thank you so much.
Safe travels.
And you, I'm taking home with me.
Okay. I wanted to say, just to chime in a little bit, in regards to the private right of action, if that's the answer. I just think that there are certain all data is not created equally. And it's, again, my medical records mean more to me than my email address. Now, when, in getting back to the DoorDash thing, and the joke that I put when I was blogging about it was, my physical address is different than my email address, right? So if you are allowing someone to know where a physical, even though they could probably figure it out through the property records or whatever, but if you're now exposing my physical address, like I said, it feels different, and everyone in here could say my medical record feels different than my credit card number. Right, we can understand what invokes that right to privacy. I can give you, I don't care if you have my email address, but if you're coming to my house because you're stalking me from a cyber perspective, I don't think that's a good idea for me because I have guns. But if you are, if you are, for people out there that have to suffer through some of these things, I'm expecting if I put my GPS location into DoorDash for them to bring me my hot wings on Sunday when I'm watching football, I expect them to own up to the responsibilities. And no, I don't expect them, DoorDash, to sell my information to Facebook, who then sells my information to someone else. I just think if you allow me, or if I'm your customer, then you have a responsibility to me. I shouldn't have to prove that I lost damages. You violated my trust. That's how I feel about it.
I fully agree with you that there is a responsibility, but your question was around internal breaches versus external breaches. So if you look up claims by breach type, insurance claims by breach type, internal breaches is 4 times bigger than external breaches. So what that means is that internal breaches do get compensated. Maybe they're not high-profile cases, but they do get, there is enough statistic to show that companies are paying more because they're internal breaches.
Right, right. Okay, so our timing's off here a little bit, but we have probably like another 5 minutes left here, so I want to try to open up to some questions. So this young lady over here.
Just as kind of a,
Yeah, you use your
oh,
microphone.
sorry. This is kind of an off-the-wall question, but
Those are the best.
so with a lot of tech companies, if you think about Facebook or Google, Wikipedia was one example you gave. We as a consumer, even though we are consuming their content, aren't paying to use the content. It is free. And in many cases, we are, the beta testers of their programming as well. And so given the fact that we're utilizing their services for free, or in the case of Uber, we're underpaying for the service since the company is losing billions of dollars, theoretically, can we have an expectation that they can't somehow use our data to monetize it, right? To continue providing a service and developing or perfecting the technology that they can then charge a quote-unquote fair market rate for.
Nothing is free. And it's not like they're not making a lot of money from their advertisers and using behavioral analytics to actually drive what you're trying to do every single day. You're being used as a guinea pig. However, I don't think that gives them carte blanche to now sell my data just because I use a particular application. Now, I am a Facebook user. However, there are mental checks that I make that I control the content that I'm putting on there. But there's value in this data-driven economy in every piece of data that they can gather about you, and they're selling it, and they're making billions of dollars out of it. So yeah, it's not, I just still don't believe you're giving that up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because like in the presentation that Harold and Valenus did here, we talked on Monday about sort of like the old days, and for those millennials who probably won't know this, but the movie and the software company, you know, AOL, you got mail, you paid $19.95 to get internet access and to send email. There wasn't really a free data trade-off, right? But I agree with you, right? The problem that we do have is that consumers need, and when we look at regulations, they have to understand that there will be a trade-off to be able to get those free services, I think, in the long run.
And I'm not going to weigh in on either side of the legal issues here, but the novel situation here that the AGs are exploring, and it'll be explored over the next couple of years, is yes, as you very correctly said, you're getting this service for free, but not really for free, but you don't have an alternative. And so, once again, has been publicly reported, the AGs are looking at the antitrust issues right now with these companies. So the question is going to become, when you don't have an alternative, are they really entitled to do what they do? Or do we need to change the system? And we'll find that out over the next couple of years.
There are dozens of rideshare companies out there. There are hundreds of home delivery of your food companies out there. People could choose to read the EULAs and decide, hey, I'd rather use this service because they say they won't sell my data, whereas the others say that they can if they choose to.
Well,
I mean, they are making, you point out the word trade-off is what is being made.
Well, like, so here's a question for the experts in the room. How many of you use DuckDuckGo? Okay, see? But there's a trade-off, because you know that they're not going to be, so that's fine. So do we, everybody's good, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But Dennis, I would say that if this was not a group full of cyber smart people,
Right, yeah.
you'd be
It's
lucky
not
to
my-
have
yeah.
one person.
Yeah, it's not my wife who gives away her email address for buy one, get one free shoes. I'm sorry, here.
Yeah. So, quick question. Given the speed and agility of these organizations, what if they start paying the user for selling their data at that point in time? Facebook monetizes at a $249 per account basis. So you can do the math of their earnings and everything else. So at $249, anything less than that, what users will give up for $50, $100? And now it becomes an issue is you've given the right to either sell your data, monetize it in some other way, and they kind of walk away from the privacy issues going, we're doing our job, and we're not. Again, I get fined $5 billion. How many users would have that covered in that scenario in some of these areas? So my fear is that it becomes one of these things of we'll change our operating model as we get closer to some of the legal ramifications that are going to do that just to abide by things. We've seen it happen before. We won't name the large organizations that have done it, but it happens.
So we have two more, so I'll let these two answer, and then we got to unfortunately cut.
There are examples of companies that charge a lot and take care of your privacy. Apple, Netflix. There are companies that actually give you something back, Ebates, and there are other companies that actually return some money. And of course, there are companies that let you go from an ad with ad model to an ad-free model when you pay them a premium. But does that change the behavior of companies? No, it doesn't. I think what is happening is that companies are evolving. They understand the pressure from consumers, not so much actually from legislation, but from consumers. And they'll end up doing the right thing. It's an iterative process, it'll evolve.
And this is just a funny story. The beta test for this is Equifax.
Yeah.
Right? I know, I'm serious. So, no, I mean, really, okay, so what it was, $125? Okay, so the story goes, my household, my mother lives with me, and she comes to me in my office and she says, well, you know, Equifax is gonna give me $125 for losing my data. And I said, I don't really wanna talk about how you're giving up all of your data for $125, but I said, Mom, they're not gonna give you $125. Well, that's what your uncle told me. And I said, Mom, they're not gonna give you $125. I said, it was how many people were impacted? 157 million, and the bucket for the $125 was like 30 million. And I said, Mom, there's the math doesn't work. But she didn't believe me. She believed my uncle. She believed my uncle. And then when they came out that next week and I showed her the article saying the money's gone and you're not getting your $125. I mean, who am I? I'm just a cybersecurity and privacy person. So people are willing, your average consumer was willing to say, oh, that punishment, my data is worth $125. So that could potentially happen.
Thank you.
Join me in thanking